What's up, guys? We're back with another Super 7 Ultimates TMNT Wave 4 review, taking a look at yet another good guy, because, again, it's all good guys this time around. We're taking a look at Mondo Gecko, our skateboarding lizard. How could you go wrong with this guy, really? Definitely a fan favorite, one that I'm happy we're getting somewhat sooner than later. Of course, we've got him here with our slipcover packaging, which is a hallmark for the line. So you've got the green slime ooze motif for the good guy, so that's what he gets. And then we get his manhole cover with his face on it and some little skateboards on the outside. Of course, pop this guy off, and then we've got our actual box within. So you've got the figure there in the big window with all of his accessories. You've got the green brick motif that's kind of bursting out to give you the figure's perspective here. And then you've got on the back a bunch of graffiti and then his nameplate and his bio. So yeah, let's do it. Let's pull him out and take a look.
And here we go, out of the package, our Mondo Gecko Ultimates figure from Super 7. This guy kind of seems like he is at a disadvantage to me because he is in such a strong wave, and he's built upon a vintage figure that really didn't have a whole lot. He just had a skateboard. So there's a lot of stuff that, like, you know, you'd get a ton of accessories with a lot of figures, but we really don't with this guy. So he's a little bit different, but he's also a huge like win as far as just recreating that figure. This is literally the vintage figure just made again. So that's a good thing. I'm not trying to be negative about that at all. So let's see what he can do, see how he moves around. We've got a head that is unfortunately kind of locked down. It really just sort of bobbles like this. Not the most movement. You've got a little bit of tilt, rotation, of course. Arms out at the shoulders, they rotate. You've got your single jointed rotating elbow. We've got rotation and hinges at the wrist, of course. The torso is interesting. So there's a waist twist here, but there's also a diaphragm joint of some kind up there. But it really doesn't do a whole lot. And honestly, I didn't know it had one. Eventually, it sort of broke free. So he kind of tilts forward. You can hear it, I'm sure, side to side. And then I would imagine it can also be rotation, but it's incredibly difficult to actually try and rotate it. I can't make it actually do much, so I'm not too sure about that. Most of your twist is going to be at the waist, but it's there, but it doesn't really do a whole lot. Kind of in the same way that Casey Jones' ball peg waist doesn't really do a whole lot. We've got legs that go out, they kick forward all the way. Twist that head back around. We've got legs that kick backwards. We've got thigh cuts up here, of course, normal stuff there. You've got your single jointed knees. Mine have been kind of stiff, especially this one, but you know, it's fine. So single joint rotation. We've got our ankles that go down into these boots, and surprisingly, they work really well. There's a huge cavity down in here to allow for movement. So, like, look at that hinge. That's crazy, which of course works really well for a character that has a skateboard. He kicks backward and forward, and there's pretty good rocker there also. Not too great, but it's pretty good for someone who, of course, like, has their foot going down into a shoe. We've also got our tail back here, so he swivels. There is sort of like a bobble. I don't know if it's a ball peg or not, but it bobbles in and out and side to side. And then you've also got another secondary point of rotation down here at the bottom. So he's basically as articulated as anything else. The big areas of concern with this guy are the torso, because it's going to make posing him dynamically on a skateboard kind of awkward, I think. And then the head, it's just, there's not a lot of movement here. There's a little bit to get him to look up some, but mostly he's just sort of, you know, kind of neutral, resting at attention, so to speak. So he's very much par for the course, but I do think he might be a little bit more limited in some ways, especially for a character that has a skateboard, which is a very dynamic accessory compared to some others.
Aesthetically, though, this guy is quite literally just like a perfect recreation of that Playmates figure in pretty much every detail. And it's a lot of the little things that bring it out, like the fact that, you know, you've got the fully painted spike on his knee pad or the fully painted skull on his knee pad. He's not nearly as gross as many other figures are. Like, he's no Muck Man, he's no Mutagen Man or anything like that, but he's very different because he's a lizard. So he's got a lot of different structure to him when it comes to having all these scales that are fully sculpted, and then they're dry brushed over top. So he's kind of like, it's kind of like the Muckman situation where he's green, but he also gets a dry brushing of a lighter green to help accent it and just to make him pop, because it works really well.
especially in conjunction with all this blue. So these little hits of blue scales and the spikes that run down his arms, not to mention the fact that he does have a really nice looking tail, which has a little mini skateboard tied to it because, of course, you know, why not? And it can touch the ground depending on how you got him posed, which is kind of cool. I do really like the implementation of these shoes. They work surprisingly well. I mean, especially from an articulation standpoint, again, look at that. That's pretty nuts. But they do look really good, too. The laces are fully sculpted, fully painted. Everything's really clean and crisp. His yellow shirt, of course, is very striking. It's very contrasting to the rest of the figure. And then, of course, you've got his little symbol, the skull and the crossbones with the skateboard instead, which I've always loved. You know, if you've got some recent NECA stuff, you might have this exact shirt, which I thought was really cool. It's nice to see this thing really cleanly tampoed on a figure. It works really, really well, so that's really nice. And in general, he's just a really cool looking figure. That's really what it comes down to. He is like one of those that exudes like a late 80s, early 90s vibe with his very radical nature. And then, of course, you know, you've got this gnarly looking head sculpt up here, which has a ton of sculpted detail all throughout because, again, covered in scales. He's got those big red eyes with the black and blue eyebrows up there. You've got the tongue sticking out, the hair slicked forward and out to the side, and then he's got those braces on the teeth, which are really nicely done. They've got a nice hit of silver metallic just to bring him out, and then, of course, he's got his backwards purple cap just to kind of top it all off. So he's maybe not as gross and disgusting as a lot of other figures, but this guy is... He is the Playmates figure just remade. And of course we'll do a comparison to that figure, and we'll do some size comparisons because this guy is kind of small. He's about the same height as a turtle, but he's not necessarily as bulky because he doesn't have a shell. But he does look fantastic. I'm very happy with the way he turned out. Again, in terms of the goal of making the Playmates figure bigger and more detailed and with more paint and more gunk and grossness, this guy exceeds really, really well. Now, of course, we have to do our comparisons, and we're going to start with the other Mondos that you can get for this era of Turtles, for that original era. So we've got, of course, our Super 7 here in the middle. We've got our Playmates vintage figure here on the right, and then on the left, we've got our NECA toon version. And this is an instance where the cartoon and the toy were not super different. There's a huge difference in terms of detail, because, of course, you know, Playmates crammed figures full of detail, and this is supposed to be a cartoon look, so he looks very, very less detailed by comparison, but he's no less accurate. So it's one of those instances where thematically and design-wise, they are very, very similar, but you just end up with two very different looks. So I really like what we've got going on here. And then, of course, you know, you can see the direct comparison between the vintage figure and the new Super 7, where they are very similar. There's just a lot more detail crammed into every inch on this new Mondo Gecko. And then as far as some direct size comparisons to, well, Super 7 Ultimates and other lines, here we've got Mondo with his Wave 4 buddy Donatello for an idea of what he looks like with a turtle. So the turtles are a little bit taller. It's not much, but they're slightly taller, and they are a little bit beefier in some ways. Mondo definitely skews a little on the small side, which I think is pretty normal. I think that's okay. And then here he is with another larger figure in Mutagen Man to give you an idea of what he looks like there, because of course he is quite a bit dwarfed by that big tube of guts. And then for some different lines, we'll move Donnie aside, and here is a Marvel Legend. Here is Nova. And then here is a NECA figure. The new Flash Gordon that they did for a more 7-inch style figure. And then here's a Black Series, so Boba Fett. And we'll do another NECA figure, but this time from the cartoon Turtles line. So here he is with that Mutagen Man. And you can see he's even bigger than that because that guy's pretty small by comparison. And then we'll throw a Mythic Legion in for another 7-inch style figure. And then a NECA Toon Turtle for something that skews a little bit on the smaller side. So you can see that he is definitely a little bit smaller than the rest of the Ultimates line. I'm not saying that in a negative sense. It's just he is a little bit on the smaller side. So he fits in pretty well with the Turtles, and then he's going to make the bigger figures look a lot bigger by comparison. So I think he fits very much in line with how he should be for what kind of character, what kind of creature he is. And then as far as accessories goes, Mondo doesn't have like a ton. And the vintage figure only had, what, the skateboard and a thing of stickers, right? Like it had this and some stickers. This guy comes with a few extra things, but it's not a lot. He definitely has less than normal. I'm assuming, a lot of it does come to the fact that he has a very intricate accessory with that skateboard, but he does have an extra head sculpt to start with. So you've got the open mouth this time with the tongue sticking right out the front. Dare I say this is my preferred head sculpt. I think they made a really solid choice with this particular alt head. It looks really cool. And then we get some extra hands as well, of course, just to kind of bulk him up. So he has these sort of loose gripping hands in the box. You get a set of gripping hands. You get a set of splayed finger hands, which these definitely work with him being, like a lizard, a gecko. That kind of works. You get a left fist, and then you get this, which is a very unique hand. So it's like the, what do they call it? The shaka. So you get one of these for his right, which definitely plays up the whole, like, extreme radical kind of thing for him. So I do like that. And then we, of course, get his, like, turbo-powered skateboard. It has moving wheels. So they do spin. There's metallic accents on the bottom and on the top. There's 2 pegs, and then you've got that very awesome logo of his emblazoned on the top with all this blue and green fire. It looks great. It's really nicely done. It's really big. I do think that the one criticism I have when it comes to this as a whole is that he is slightly limited with his articulation. It does make it, at least for me, difficult to pose him on this. I feel like if he had one of those, diaphragm cuts with an actual joint up there that would move, he would work a little bit better to hunch him over and get him kind of crouched down into a more dynamic pose. He does stand on this just fine, so there's no real balance issues or anything like that, but he does have some issues posing him in a real exciting way, at least for me, for now anyway. So, kind of like first shake on him, I do have some issues posing him in anything that's more than just sort of standing on it. But he does have the most important Mondo accessory. He doesn't really have much else outside of some parts to change him up. But I'm glad we got what we got here, and I am really glad, among all else, that we got this head sculpt, because I really do like that. If anything, that's my favorite accessory in this box. So overall, I'd say we have a pretty solid figure here when it comes to Mondo, but this is a really strong wave, and I'm going to say that for my purposes, like my interest with this wave, he's probably my least favorite, and I say that in the most positive way possible. He's my least favorite. He's not a bad figure. He's just kind of overshadowed by Donnie, Casey, and of course Muckman for me. He is, however, an incredibly well done reinterpretation of that Playmates figure. Like, it's literally that figure, just made bigger with more articulation, more paint, and the same accessory. Like, he has the quintessential Mondo accessory by having that skateboard, and they gave him a handful of hands, and they gave him that awesome extra head sculpt. So he maybe isn't as exciting for me personally as some of the others, but he's no less of a good figure. I think this is a really solid entry in the line. Hopefully, down the road, we'll get his like alternate version that came with the little pack-in buddy, because I'd love to get more Mondo, but for now, this one is a great start. So that's going to do it for this look at the Super 7 Ultimates Mondo Gecko. Let me know what you guys think. Feel free to like, comment, subscribe, and share, and until next time.